Eden Lake is a 2008 survival horror movie starring Kelly Riley, Jack O'Connell and a before he was really famous Michael Fassbender. It was directed by James Watkins. Nursery school teacher Jenny and her boyfriend Steve decide to go off on a little romantic adventure. They journey to a flooded quarry in the English countryside. The quarry and the surrounding woods are soon to be turned into luxury housing for rich people, and it has since been named Eden Lake. The young couple begin to relax beside the lake, but their peaceful escapade is very soon disturbed when a group of rowdy teenagers show up. Steve confronts the teens but finds nothing but disrespect. After a few more very intense encounters, the situation quickly escalates to violence. Jenny and Steve soon find themselves trying to survive the night and escape from Eden Lake. Eden Lake is one of those really great movies. Not only is it a thrilling, suspenseful and entertaining horror movie, but it also contains some fairly interesting social commentary. At the time that the movie was made, England and several other European countries such as France and even my very own country of Ireland were suffering from what mainstream media news coverage were calling an epidemic. An epidemic of youth violence. Young teenagers are getting together and causing mischief and mayhem on the streets. They would get together in groups and vandalise property, steal things, intimidate people, and in the most extreme cases, they would violently attack innocent people. It was a widespread problem that garnered a lot of attention from the media. For a few years, for a lot of people, the scariest thing in the entire world would be a group of teenagers walking down the street towards you. It was a very scary time, and the mainstream media definitely did not help with the matter, with documentaries, news stories and articles written on a nearly daily basis about these teen gangs roaming the streets. It almost seemed like the government was one step away from going full-blown battle royale. Let's just throw all the teenagers in the UK onto an island and force them to murder each other. That should sort out the epidemic and keep the Daily Mail readers happy. But sadly, the problem still exists even today, with violent knife crimes involving teens in the UK growing at an alarming rate. In my opinion, some of the best horror movies often hold up a mirror to society. Eden Lake is one of those horror movies. It taps into a fear that a lot of people had at the time. A likeable, relatable, middle-class couple are harassed and eventually violently attacked by a gang of teenagers, almost completely unprovoked. At the time that the movie was made, with the rise in teenage gang-related violence, Eden Lake feels very real and very raw.
Car keys, phone, wallet.
Not us, mate.
Steve, come on, let's leave it.
You wearing my shades?
Nah, mine, mate.
Your Ray-Ban aviators.
Fakes, mate.
The villains of the movie are just a group of teenagers, the type that is very, very common. Not hockey mask wearing indestructible zombies, or a burned up pedophile who kills people in their dreams. They are not vampires, ghosts, serial killers playing dress up. They aren't even a creepy Japanese girl who fell down a well. The big bad guys in Eden Lake are just teenagers, the likes of which a lot of us see on a daily basis. They may be violent, troublemaking teens, but they are just teenagers. They are realistic threats based on real world problems, and that makes them absolutely terrifying. Now, obviously, not all teenagers are violent reprobates, but Eden Lake has been criticised for fear-mongering, villainising teenagers. I don't agree with that criticism. The movie points out on more than one occasion that the teenage gang are also victims. Victims of bad parenting, victims of bullying, and victims of peer pressure. In fact, there are a few moments when some of the teens are intimidated and bullied into committing violent acts. Not all the kids in the movie are painted as villains. And again, that makes them quite realistic. These kids were not born evil. No child is born evil. Except for maybe Damien. That kid was most definitely born evil. The little freak. Eden Lake also explores some ideas involving the class system. Jenny and Steve are a financially well-off couple, maybe upper middle class. They have very nice expensive clothes, phones, and even a good looking car. The teenagers and the other locals we glimpse around Eden Lake are lower class. The movie proposes the idea that the mistreatment of lower class people actually helps create an environment which spawns the type of violence that the upper class fear so much. It is not explored in too much detail. The movie definitely does contain commentary about the divide within the class system. The best example of this is a scene in which Steve mocks the lower class people at a local pub.
You want beef, eh? You want beef? You fucking dickhead. You want beef?
Go on, go and tell them to shut up.
You tell them.
So, due to the fact that it explores some real world issues, Eden Lake ends up packing quite a powerful and thought-provoking narrative. Now, if you were to strip away all of the social commentary aspects of the movie, I do not know why you would do such a thing, but if you did, The Leftovers would still be a pretty great horror film. The movie starts off very slow, allowing time to develop the characters. We learn to like Jenny and Steve. As the movie continues and the young couple encounter the teenagers for the first time, the movie slowly gets more and more suspenseful. Eventually, as the encounters quickly escalate into violence, the movie becomes very intense, and it pretty much turns into an extended chase sequence. The movie is often considered extreme. It does contain some pretty graphic violence and a few very disturbing moments. Some of the more bloody, violent or disturbing sequences actually happen off screen, allowing the viewer's imagination to run wild. Now, don't get me wrong, the movie is still really violent, but I wouldn't really call it all that extreme. The violence in the movie is done in a very realistic manner, but I feel like it is not overly gratuitous. Like a lot of other elements of the movie, the realism of the violence makes it seem a lot more extreme than it actually is. Eden Lake is a survival horror movie. The horror comes not from jump scares or traditionally scary moments. The horror is more about the situation, that inescapable dread of being trapped and hunted. There are quite a lot of suspenseful moments. James Watkins' direction is terrific, giving certain sequences a tense energy and shooting the violence in a very impactful manner. The early parts of the movie are very calm and almost relaxing, with beautiful serene shots of the peaceful lake and surrounding forest. Once the horror really kicks in, that peacefulness is completely shattered. A lot of the shots become handheld, which creates an uneasy atmosphere. Eden Lake also has a really clever use of colour. It is an interesting colour palette. When the movie begins, it is very, very colourful. There's a lot of vibrant and saturated colours. As the movie continues and becomes a lot bleaker, that colour is drained from the movie. It becomes a lot darker and washed out. It is a wonderful use of colour that adds to the movie's increasingly darker and depressing tone. Horror movies tend to work best whenever the main characters are likeable, or at the very least sympathetic. Jenny and Steve are both quite likeable and very sympathetic. Steve is played by Michael Fassbender. Steve's entire reason for going to Eden Lake in the first place is to propose to Jenny. He is just a man in love with a beautiful woman. Unfortunately, Steve has to man up and speak to the troubled teens when they cause a bit of a commotion. He has to defend the honour of his hopefully future wife. Now, this need to protect Jenny leads Steve down a road where he makes some really stupid choices. In fact, Steve's inability to just simply walk away ends up accidentally causing the situation to escalate quicker. Steve is just a guy who winds up in a terrible situation and he tries to make the best of it, but he continuously makes the wrong choices. Michael Fassbender gives a pretty solid performance. It may not be his best performance ever, but you can clearly see glimpses of the talent that would eventually turn him into a Hollywood star. The leader of the teenage gang is Brett, played by Jack O'Connell. Brett is a very typical bully. You get the feeling he doesn't really have any friends, and the fellow teens that he surrounds himself with are just people that he bullied or intimidated into hanging out with him. He is realistically evil and very menacing. He seems like he is always one step away from killing everyone around him. Jack O'Connell's performance is terrific and scary. Brett is simply a fantastic villain. He perfectly captures a character who is constantly angry with the world around him. Surprisingly, there are teeny tiny glimpses of some humanity. Deep down, Brett is really just a victim of the environment, making the character just a little bit tragic. The main character of the movie is unquestionably Jenny, played by Kelly Reilly. Jenny goes on a very clear character arc throughout the movie. The film begins with her teaching kids. She obviously cares a lot about children and enjoys being around them. Let's just say by the end of the movie, she doesn't really feel the same way. Jenny's character arc is also probably best represented by her physical appearance. Early on, she is smiling, she is happy, she is pretty, and wearing nice clean clothes. Late in the movie, she is exhausted, she is angry, she is covered in blood and mud. She basically transforms into a different person due to her experiences. Jenny is just a likeable, good-natured woman who gets put through absolute hell, both emotionally and physically. Her constant struggle for survival makes her very endearing and extremely sympathetic. Kelly Reilly's performance is wonderful. What begins as a charismatic and likeable performance soon turns into a very real, raw and emotional one. You can just see the desperation and fear on her face. By the end of the movie, you want to see Jenny survive her nightmare. Now, I think Kelly Reilly is very pretty and I wish she was in more things. But more importantly, she is a great actress. Thanks to Kelly Reilly's performance, over time the character of Jenny has gone on to become one of my all-time favourite horror movie characters.
Hey, Jenny!
Nearly!
Now, before I end this review, I just want to very briefly mention the ending. Without spoiling anything at all, I loved the ending, which does a great job at hammering home a couple of the movie's major themes. A great ending to a great movie. Eden Lake could have been an exploitative and forgettable movie, a cheap and nasty film exploiting a common fare of the time. Luckily, the movie actually has something intelligent to say about the times that we live in. What could have been a disposable piece of entertainment instead turned out to be a thought-provoking and memorable piece of horror cinema.
Come on!
Thanks to social commentary, great performances, and some really intense and suspenseful sequences, Eden Lake is a great horror movie. I am giving it an overall score of 4 out of 5. Bloody, brutal, and pretty damn entertaining while also making you think. I highly recommend checking it out.